Welcome to another episode of Off the Menu. I'm Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with author and historian Charles Coulombe.
That's it? No adjective?
No, not... It can't go on forever, Charles.
Sure it can.
You can?
Yeah. Use impecunious.
Impecunious?
Impecunious.
What is that?
I'm not going to tell you. Look it up. And the same is true for the rest of you all. Look up impecunious. You will understand what it is to be a freelance writer.
Wow. Okay.
The impecunious Charles Coulombe. That fits.
Yeah?
Yeah. Look it up.
Fantastic.
Why do you guys slave away to the studio when I could be upstairs with the suits? It's because I'm impecunious.
I'm sure that makes sense.
It does. I'll tell you what, ladies and gentlemen. Next to the what do you call them? The not domestic staff, but the custodial staff at this wonderful building of ours, I am probably the worst paid of the bunch, and that includes the girls in the secretarial pool. I know, because I was trying to do that down at the canteen. Never mind. Mm-hmm. Anyway, the point is, as far I know where I am in the pecking order here at Tumblr House.
I'm a company man.
I know you are. I'll say. You're the one who's always saying that, oh, this is great food at the canteen.
Yeah.
You told me never do the fish sandwiches later in the week.
Yeah.
They can't be that bad. Anyway, let's go. They don't need to hear this. Let's go.
Yeah.
All right. So, but you know what day is today? Although it is a fish day.
Yeah, Friday.
It is. So if you were eating at the Tumblr House canteen, this would be the day for haddock.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, it is Candlemas Day.
Oh, hooray.
The double feast, presentation of our Lord and the purification of Our Lady in the Temple of Jerusalem, where Simeon and Anna came forward and all that. It's a wonderful feast. And the liturgy is out of this world with candles, hence the name Candlemas. The blessing, the procession, the holding the candles, a good chunk of the Mass. Wonderful stuff. It is also the beginning of Black History Month. Yes. It sure is. And almost in a weird way of dishonoring Black History Month, the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament, St. Catherine Drexel's order, are selling two very historic places. Because having gotten rid of their habits and their rule that their founders gave them, they haven't getting many people or money. Mm. So what they're selling is their mother house in Bensalem, Pennsylvania, including the shrine of the founders. I'm sure they're going to move her somewhere, but it's very, very sad. And the second, she's one of my favorite saints, by the way, St. Catherine Drexel, so it's not pleasant. The other thing they're giving up is their convent in Powhatan, Virginia. They're selling that. Now, that place has some interesting history behind it. It was the site of St. Emma's Military School that went from the 1890s, I think, to 1974. The only black military school in this country.
Wow.
Yeah. And it closed down in the 70s, as so many black institutions invented during Jim Crow did. And now, of course, it's completely forgotten what a great school it was. It had a girls' companion school, St. Francis. It was equally renowned. But all that's flushed down the river now. And nobody knows and nobody cares, because after all, it's just blacks and just Catholics, so why should anyone care? But I do. So now I've just mentioned it.
Gosh. Well, that's too bad.
Well, not really. It's a crime, but, you know. Too bad is when you get hit by lightning. Crime is when something that could be prevented isn't.
Yeah. Well, I think you left out one thing for today. Today's, I believe, Groundhog Day.
So it is. Punxsutawney Phil.
Little Punxsutawney Phil is hurt.
Oh, I know. Poor little Punxsutawney Phil. And you know, he'd be delicious, really.
Hey.
What?
That's not nice. Poor little groundhog. You don't eat groundhog.
Of course you do.
You French Canadians are savages.
Well, at least you don't try to tell weather with them. That's pretty crazy. You know what? There are going to be six more weeks of winter. This is midwinter. course there are going to be 6 weeks of winter. Look, I think you guys are putting too much pressure on one little groundhog. And I think you're denying yourselves a really delicious culinary experience.
Oh, you're terrible. That's awful.
Poor little Punxsutawney Phil. I mean, I can see him, in the pot with a little top hat on top of it.
You're a monster.
All right, no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean that, did I?
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did, actually.
Poor little Punxsutawney Phil. Well, it doesn't matter. I was like Bambi. This is another little piece of deliciousness.
You'd eat Bambi? Well, venison, I can understand that over groundhog. Okay.
Well, I prefer venison to groundhog, too.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, Bambi I can see.
All right.
I never actually liked Bambi, so...
No?
I'm kind of biased, but yeah.
All right.
I like Punxsutawney Phil.
Yeah, I might, too. Depending on what he was served with. But Punxsutawney Phil actually is kind of elderly for a groundhog. It's the young ones that are the tastier.
Okay, let's start. This is
all right, let's go ahead.
This is terrible. Okay, first question today. What do you think of the Russian Orthodox Church trying to decriminalize domestic violence in Russia? I thought Christianity was against domestic violence. What is the Catholic Church's view on what to do about a domestic violence situation? I know we don't believe in divorce, but this was weighing heavily on my mind.
Okay, well, there are a couple of things here to keep in mind. One is, what do we mean by domestic violence? Do we just mean the husband and wife going at it with, banging away at each other with frying pans, or what? I guess let me put this another way. I've come out in favor of corporal punishment before, of children,
right.
I mean.
Right.
Now, that today often gets labeled child abuse. And yet it is becoming illegal in many jurisdictions, corporal punishment has. I mean, what my father would do with us, which, honestly, I think was a big part of our character formation. Not so much the thing itself, which didn't happen that often, but the possible threat of it.
Mm-hmm.
That would be called child abuse today.
Yeah.
And if through some miraculous occurrence we were suddenly governed by people who weren't crazy, and they decided to specifically make spanking legal again, you might look at that and say, oh, they're ending the child abuse laws. It depends on what we're calling child abuse. Sexual exploitation, child abuse. Holding the kid's face into the fire, child abuse. That's child abuse.
Yeah.
Spanking the kid with a real purpose that causes no real damage and allows you to reinforce your points as in, don't do this so I don't have to do this again, that's not abuse. The fact is that children have very wayward wills. Now, it is certainly true that in days gone by, less sophisticated Western societies who didn't murder their infants the way we do. What?
Yeah, less sophisticated societies
who
don't murder their kids. Yeah.
Right. One thing they would do is sometimes it was permitted for husbands to punish recalcitrant wives. You know what the rule of thumb is?
The rule of thumb? No. What's the rule of thumb?
It comes from the Old English law. You couldn't beat your wife with anything thicker than that, the first joint of the thumb. That's the rule of thumb. Now, I got to tell you, though, ladies and gentlemen, for me personally, you got a real problem if you're at that point in your marriage. I'm sorry, you really do. I mean, if she's taking after you with the frying pan and you're measuring a switch, you guys have some real problems, and probably they began when you got married and married the wrong person. I mean, you got problems there. So the point I'm making, though, is I would like to know precisely what they mean by domestic violence laws. Because that could mean anything. I mean, are the Russians saying that it's okay now for husband and wife to go after each other with pistols? I don't think so. I don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
What I do know, though, is that we are in a society today that puts a lot of pressure on both husband and wife to work, at the same time that it's incapable of altering human nature, so that men and women expect different things out of each other. And when they're no longer able to play their enforced gender roles.
Enforced?
Enforced, yes, it's terrible how custom and tradition have forced men and women to behave like men and women. It's just terrible stuff. Because you see, those gender roles, ladies and gentlemen, actually grew up. Societies embraced them, etc., because of the facts of men and women. Starting with the most obvious, the biological organs and so forth. I mean, if you're going to go on about gender roles, you might as well protest against organ roles. You know, why do I have to smell through my nose? Why can't it be through my ear?
Well, the ear doesn't have that sense.
Well, says you. Well, why can't a man be a woman, be a man, be a woman, be non-binary? These are artificial social constructs. How come I can't walk on my tongue? Why do I have to wear my trousers on my legs?
Well, you're talking about physical things.
No, I'm talking about organ roles.
Gender is a feeling.
No.
You are what you feel.
That's what I'm saying. Why can't I walk on my ear?
Well, that's a physical trait. Science says you can. See, science.
Science. All right, well, let me make this really, really clear. Actually, you may think you feel like a woman and you're biologically a man, or vice versa. It's not true. It's not true. Why do I say that? I don't know if we've discussed this before. Have we? I don't know.
Could be.
Could be. Well, anyway, it bears repeating, I guess. It's like this, ladies and gentlemen. You may be a biological male and decide that you like guys, you want to dress like a woman and all that, and so you're not really a man. No. 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 You will never think like a woman. Ever. Why? You won't have the monthly physical changes that are such a big part of a woman's life and her disposition. You won't have the big question of reproduction hanging over your head. Will I ever have kids? Do I want kids? Do I not want kids? So on and so on. Every woman has to deal with that particular thing. No man does. And it does not affect a man's thinking. And the third, and I hate to be...
Debbie Downer?
Yeah, is the fear of rape. It's always there in the background of a woman's mind. It just isn't in a man's mind.
That's interesting.
Well, it's the way it is. Women have a whole different set of problems motivated by biology.
That's true. The whole Me Too thing. How come women are limited to Me Too? Because that's based on traditional gender roles.
Precisely. Now, men, on the other hand, they have their own set. I mean, you may be a woman who likes women, you want to be a truck driver or a hockey player or whatever. You may think, I've never liked girly stuff. Yeah, well, trust me, though. All that stuff I talked about, that's true for you, too, anyway. And if you were a man, it just wouldn't be in the mix. And these are simple biological realities. So, I repeat, gender roles are not something invented to oppress women and men any more than organ roles, nose, eyes, hands, feet, etc., are social constructs to force us to dress like this and to act like this.
Okay. Well, what if someone says you're depriving us of our right to pursue happiness?
Then I say, break organ roles.
Break organ roles?
Break organ roles. Show us how free you are.
But maybe that's not for him. But maybe if someone is interested in what you're talking about,
I think you should try it. Try walking with your nose and get back to me.
Maybe he's a supporter of your organ roles.
Breaking organ roles.
But it's just not for him.
Well, that could be, as long as he'll come out for it publicly. And not be afraid of society's disdain.
Okay, Jules.
That's all I got to say about that.
Okay.
I mean, again, to answer your question, I really don't know what they mean by domestic violence, and I'd have to know what they're saying to give you an answer beyond what I've said. So, what else we got?
Jules A. Samuel sent in 3 good questions.
Wow.
His first question is, as an Englishman, is it acceptable to venerate Charles I as King Martyr? There are several, mainly Anglican societies dedicated to it, but I wondered as to your take.
Well, I am not an Englishman. I am a French-Canadian man. But I am a member of the Society of King Charles the Martyr. And this is a weird, eerie coincidence that I should have been wearing this thing when you asked me this question.
I like it.
Isn't that funny? Well, anyway, and it is, ladies and gentlemen, an actual coincidence. I had no idea about this, but I was getting myself in costume. Well, yeah. Here's the thing. Charles I was not, as they say, in full communion with the Catholic Church. But, and here's the big but, he accepted papal primacy in the spiritual realm. He was negotiating at various points through his career for reunion with the Holy See. The 3 things that kept him out of the church were, 1, the idea that the Pope had the ability to depose temporal sovereigns, which was something that was talked about then, but has never been a matter of faith. The second was the activity of Cardinal Richelieu in undermining various Catholic rulers in Europe, which he didn't like. And the third was the probable response of a good piece of the population of Great Britain. And considering that his reign was the time of the Wars of the 3 Kingdoms, he obviously did know what he was talking about. He certainly expressed his desire for reunion very forcibly, very remarkably in a letter to Pope Gregory XV, in which he said he would hazard his kingdom and life itself to bring about such a union. And it's one of the things they threw up at him in his trial. The other thing that got him killed was his defense of the apostolic succession of the Church of England. Now we know, of course, today that it was already extinct by that time, but he didn't. There was no apostolice curiae of Leo XIII in the 16th century, the 1600s. The ultimate question, you could venerate him as a martyr. The Society of King Charles the Martyr has had Catholic patrons in the past, like Father Jean Charoux, who was a friend of mine, and actually wrote a pamphlet, The Sanctity of Charles I, trying to push his sanctity from a Catholic point of view. The highest ranking Catholic layman in England, Lord Nicholas Windsor, is a patron of the Society today. And I happen to know the Society have just opened up their first chapter in a Catholic parish here in Southern California. In fact, I'm a member of it, so I know. And add insult to injury, if injury could be added to it, the old canard that he martyred, that he was responsible for the martyrdom of a number of Catholic priests, simply isn't true. There were martyrdoms that occurred during his reign, but they were inevitably the work of the Long Parliament. The people that also killed Archbishop Laud and Strafford, his 2 closest collaborators. So if he couldn't defend them, he couldn't defend Catholic priests. He did inherit a number of Catholic priests in jail in London when he became king. He didn't feel that he could liberate them, but here's the funny thing. As long as he was actually in charge during what was called the King's Peace, they got out every day. They were allowed to go around London and visit the Catholics. And then they came back to the jail at night. So it was almost like running a rectory. But when the Long Parliament was called and took over, they of course had all those people executed, as they did Laud and Strafford. There's nothing the king could have done about it other than try to regain control of the country from the Long Parliament, which is what he did, which is what gave us the Civil War, which was what ended up with his being beheaded. So, you know, and I've had people on this very issue write me things like, well, he should have been heroic. And stop. You mean the way we are about abortion? You know, you got to bear in mind something. England had already been through a very bloody civil war in the 1400s, about 150 years before. It was called the War of the Roses. And it was horrible. They knew from a relatively recent time what civil war was like. And a civil war this time that would have the added religious element to it on top of everything else. That, so far as the king could see, would just be an utter reduction of his three kingdoms into slaughterhouses. Oh, and by the way, he was right. But the Long Parliament wanted to run the show. And we know, in terms of killing priests and so forth, how they wanted to run the show. So at the end of the day, he couldn't go along with it. And it's interesting that all the Catholics of the three kingdoms sided with him against Parliament and against Cromwell. And let's not forget his giving Maryland to Lord Baltimore, for those of us who live in the United States. But, and here's the big but, he was canonized by the Church of England after Cromwell went to moron heaven. And he was the only one that they've ever tried to canonize. Well, the thing is that for Catholic devotees of Charles I, unlike the Anglicans, who can call him a saint if they want, because, you know, if you're a member of the Anglican Communion, they made a mistake. Just as there are a whole bunch of Greek Orthodox saints that we do not venerate, although there are a number that we do, that were not in, that were after the schism. There's a whole list of them, about 24, if I remember correctly, of Eastern Orthodox saints that were permitted to venerate.
Yeah.
But with Charles I, it's a little bit different, because the Anglican Church is not the Orthodox Church, which has this weird sacramental connection with us. But what is permissible to the Catholic is to attempt to open the cause of Charles I in the Church. And how do you do that? Well, you do it the way it's done with anybody else. You start out by making his life known, venerating him privately, and praying for miracles through his intercession. Now, there are a lot of people like that in the Church, tons and tons and tons in that particular position. But let's say you finally get a diocese to get interested in it. And in the case of Charles I, if it ever happened, it would probably be one of the English dioceses or one of the ordinariates. But let's say you get that underway. Well, then they put together his cause, they officially open it, and they submit it to Rome. All right? And from that point on, he's called a servant of God. Now, there are a lot of servants of God who have built-in constituencies and built-in critics. You know, Queen Isabella of Spain has a lot of devotees. I'm one of them. But a lot of people accuse her of being anti-Semitic and all this.
Yeah.
Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, the first president, who was a Catholic. A lot of people, he's a servant of God now, his cause has been introduced. Some people are all for him. He was very pious, very devout in his private life, and so on and so forth. Other people say, no, he was an evil communist.
Okay.
And then, of course, there's Dorothy Day of the Catholic Worker, who's a similarly controversial figure. Be the same with Charles I. You know, they'll be, presuming it ever gets that far. And that, of course, is what a Catholic devotee of Charles I would be working for. Presuming it does get that far at some point. Obviously, if it doesn't, then it doesn't. But if it does, there'll be built-in critics, because people are very emotional about Charles I.
Right.
And part of it is, especially converts to Catholicism, cradle Catholics who actually get to know about him rarely have trouble with him. But when you convert to the Catholic Church and you're in the position of being mandated by Benedict XIV, the 16th rather, to bring in a big chunk of your heritage with you, the question is precisely what and how much.
Yeah.
And so Charles I was married to a Catholic queen whose two sons died in the church, who whose queen venerated the site of the Catholic martyrs at Tyburn. All this sort of stuff. Very few cradle Catholics have trouble with him.
Mm-hmm.
But converts tend to be very emotional, for or against him. And you can see why. Because for some, he's part of all that we're leaving behind. For others, his vision of the church, of reunion between Rome and England, all these sorts of things, his heroic death, that's what we're bringing into the church. But you can see how, and mind you again, as a cradle Catholic, I don't have the same emotional...
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it seems fairly obvious. But I don't have a lot of selfhood bound up with it. So, anyway, from my point of view, and I know that it's certainly true in the ordinariate of the Chair of St. Peter here in the States, you can certainly venerate Charles I with the knowledge that you're not doing so as a saint, but as a potential servant of God, as a potential cause for canonization.
This question is quite a coincidence because you just wrote an article. Is Charles I a saint?
I did.
A two-part article, very lengthy. We linked to it on Charles's page on the Tumblr House website. So if you'd like more information about this topic, that page is for you. That article is for you.
Yeah, it's amazing though how it gets people upset. I had one person, and again, I can't be too annoyed because it's the emotions again. It says, I don't know if I'm going to bother reading this. Is it bother reading this article to say no? And I thought, yeah, okay. There's nothing quite like an open mind and an informed opinion. And that was nothing like an open mind or an informed opinion.
Yeah, well, that's most people nowadays, to be honest.
What do you mean? That's not true. We smart. We got internet.
No, that doesn't make you... The internet doesn't make you smart.
Yeah, it does. If you don't got it, then you're a big fat dum-dum.
Oh, that's insulting to indigenous people.
Yeah, and to big fat dum-dums.
Yeah.
I know, I have one. Never mind.
All right. Jules Samuel's second question. This is kind of related, coincidental. Should we pray for the canonization of leaders such as Franco, Dolfuss, etc.?
Same. I mean, Dolfuss, I mean, certainly his faith was one of the reasons the Nazis hated him and killed him. There's no doubt about that. Franco was certainly a devout Catholic. I mean, being devout doesn't by itself make you a saint. It just makes you sane and perspicacious.
Perspicacious?
Perspicacious. Oh, that's another word they didn't teach.
Isn't that a big vocabulary?
Yeah, no. Perspicacious is seeing how things are.
Oh, seeing how things are. Okay.
Figuring out how things work.
Okay.
See, a devout Catholic is someone who understands the realities of the universe and lives according to them to the best of his ability. I mean, if I know I'll go to hell if I do this and such, and I'm absolutely sure I will, I'm not going to do that.
Right.
That's just reality.
Yeah.
That's all. And you may look at that and say, boy, Charles has he's really a holy person. He never does anything like that. Not necessarily. It's just Charles knows which way the wind blows.
Yeah. Which
way is up. He's just not a moron.
Moron.
A moron. So, being a devout Catholic doesn't necessarily mean you're virtuous or nice. It just means you're sane and you know how things work. But, no, of course you can pray for people like that. You can pray for anybody's canonization you want. And then, because where do you think these causes come from? It's not from the top up. Some pope looks around and says, we must canonize someone today. Who do we canonize?
You can pray for anyone you want?
You can pray for anyone you want, but, I mean, obviously you should try to look for people with some traction.
Some traction. Well, that's a good idea. There are some very, very strange people out there who try to defend Hitler and Hitler's Catholicism. Should we pray for Hitler's canonization?
I wouldn't.
You just said we could pray for anybody.
Well, you can. I just said I wouldn't. I said you can. That doesn't mean I will. But see, that goes back to what I said earlier about, Queen Isabella, Dorothy Day, Julius Nyerere. Every one of those three has violent fans and violent opponents. Every one of them. Personally, I wish them all well, simply because the more people who were canonized who had really bad peccadillos, the likelier it is I can get into heaven. So I'm all for the odds going up in my favor. But seriously, no, I mean, I certainly wouldn't pray for Hitler canonized because I know too much.
Thank goodness.
But and see, that's the other thing. I mean, study these guys. If you're really interested in Franco, really interested in Dolfuss, study their lives. On what basis would they be canonized? Remember, what is canonization? Canonization is the church saying this person is in heaven.
Yeah.
Infallibly. Okay. How does she do that? Well, the first thing she does is she looks very carefully at the life of the person. She looks for glaring heresy. She looks for glaring errors in judgment. She looks for all kinds of stuff. Thomas à Kempis, who wrote Imitation of Christ, will never be canonized. The reason why he'll never be canonized is because part of the process is they dig you up to see what state your body's in. Sometimes the people have been corrupt, all sorts of things. St. Anthony of Padua was corrupt except his tongue, which was weird, but I mean, it spoke to his eloquence.
Yeah.
But they dug up Thomas à Kempis, and what they found was that apparently, after they buried, it was a premature burial. He'd woken up in the coffin and chewed his hands. Now, that could mean that he had had final despair. It doesn't mean he did.
Yeah.
And you can even pray privately to Thomas à Kempis if you like, but that cause is never going to go any further than that.
Yeah.
Just because...
Yeah, there needs to be no doubt.
There needs to be no doubt. Yet, that doesn't keep you from having a private veneration to any servant of God you like. My own father was named Guy, which is not a name in our family, after a very popular then very popular servant of God called Guy de Fongalon, who was this little French noble boy who died of the influenza or something in 1918. He was 6 or something. He was the youngest person ever to be proposed for canonization. And for whatever reason, they decided it wasn't going to go any further.
Yeah.
But there's still institutions named after him. My dad had a holy card of him because it was his namesake.
Right.
So these are areas where the church allows a lot of personal liberty, a lot of personal freedom, because it's in people getting together and pushing that eventually these examples of holiness get to be known. And obviously you're not going to push them unless you know something about them, you learn something about them. So, I mean, when people say, well, is it okay to venerate so-and-so privately, as long as they're not a notorious evil liver and so on and so forth, and you think they might have a swing at it, go ahead and, organize some group, friends of so-and-so, to study up on their lives, see if there's anything that would really knock them out of the ring. I mean, Dorothy Day had a kid out of wedlock.
Okay.
You see, so it's the entirety of their life.
Yeah.
That they look at.
Yeah.
Not one little piece.
Yeah.
And that's also what people have to avoid. Well, I can't believe so-and-so could be a saint. Look what they did. Well, other than proposing your judgment to be greater than the church's, especially after she's certified 1 or 2 or 3 miracles to the person's favor. I mean, I honestly think, myself included, that most of us wouldn't know a real living saint if she popped us in the head.
I have a question. How is it that having a kid out of wedlock doesn't auto-disqualify you, but then when you're buried alive and you chew your fingernails?
Because we know what happened with the kid out of wedlock. She raised her as a Catholic.
Okay.
And she ended up as devout as her mother.
Okay.
Whereas with the chewing on the thing, we don't know what happened with that story.
Okay, I see.
I mean, and we know she was penitent, which we can't know about Thomas à Kempis. I mean, maybe he despaired, but then completely repented of it, in which case he'd be in heaven. That's what I'm saying. We don't know that he's not in heaven. It's the doubt.
I see.
I mean, if she had died, you know, and her daughter had been, you know, said my mother was a phony and a fraud, and you know, she was this and that, that might have very well been a thing against her, simply because we can't know the answer. But in the case of Dorothy Day, we know what how the story ended up.
I see.
She raised the kid in the church. She was very penitent for the life she led. We know that.
Yeah.
And you know, there are a lot of saints who have lived lives at some point in their times that were less than saintly.
Right.
But being a saint is where you are at the moment of death.
Ah, I see.
With Charles I, he says, I die a member of the Church of England as I found it under my father. One of the things that people who are experts in that era have pointed out is that people who were anti-Roman at that time didn't say that. They say, I die a member of the Protestant Church of England.
Okay.
They didn't mention that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's, you have all sorts of interesting nits and pieces, but this stuff at the end of the day can only really be brought out by a formal cause and a formal investigation. But you can't have that until the thing becomes something.
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah, it can't just come out of thin air.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that means that you know, you've got to sit down with yourself, with friends or whatever, and see if there's anything to this. And if there is, great. And if there isn't, well.
Okay. Joel Samuel's final question is, what is your take on the Alsace-Lorraine debate? My mother comes from Alsace and is staunchly pro-French, as am I. But I'm curious as to your take on this.
Well, I'm pro-French myself. But
what is the debate?
The debate is this. Alsace and Lorraine are two provinces currently in France, on the French side of the Rhine. But they're German-speaking. Or they speak a German dialect. More in Alsace than Lorraine, but Lorraine too. They're, what's the word I want? They are German speakers, but they're very, very patriotic Frenchmen.
Okay.
There's a long history behind that.
Okay.
They were part of the Holy Roman Empire. Then they were snatched by Louis XIV. Then, after the Franco-Prussian War, they were nicked by the Germans. And then the French got them back after World War I.
Okay.
And then Hitler re-annexed them.
Oh, wow.
And then they got them back after World War II.
Ping pong.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. But one of the great, you know, they say God brings good out of evil. Well, France, you know, the regulations of the French church that made it the quasi-state church were done by Napoleon and Pius VII under the Concordat of 1801. Now, when the Germans seized Alsace-Lorraine, the Concordat remained in effect in Alsace-Lorraine. Then in 1905, while the Alsace-Lorraine was still under the Germans, the French government voided the Concordat, seized all the church's property, went through a real big anti-clerical thing. But it didn't affect Alsace-Lorraine. So Alsace and Lorraine were finally returned. They are still under the Concordat. The Catholic Church is still the state church of Alsace and Lorraine.
Okay, so where's the conflict? Where's the debate? Does Germany want them?
Well, no, it has from time to time. I don't think they want them now. But the question is always, you know, who do they belong with, really? With France, with Germany?
Is that what they're asking, or what outsiders are asking?
Both. More outsiders today, I would
Why
think.
would the outsiders care?
Because outsiders are either French or German.
Oh, okay.
And so the question is, well, do you think that they belong with France or Germany? And I believe France. mind you.
Wow, that's so surprising.
Yes, but I do believe in taking every possible step to retain and protect their unique German dialects, and particularly to retain the position of the church in Alsace-Lorraine, and maybe with any luck spread it over the rest of France.
Ooh.
You know, you can always hope that it will.
Yeah.
I've always thought that if the Germans before World War I had a Catholic Kaiser, I would say, you know what, we'll give it back to you free.
Yeah.
No, we'll give it back, but you got to do a couple things.
Okay. Next question is from Jean Duplachane. How would you go about converting a Muslim?
Well, first I'd ask him to put down his sword and pistol.
Whoa.
And not to...
Whoa.
Please don't behead me. But no, seriously. Presuming that he was a sufficiently westernized Muslim to believe in discourse.
Ecumenism?
No, discourse.
Oh, discourse. Okay.
That is to say, the ability to talk to someone of differing beliefs without blowing their brains out.
Oh, that.
I mean, something.
Okay.
We Americans are getting less and less capable of it.
That, oh boy, ain't that the truth?
So I mean, you know, it's a lot to expect out of people from elsewhere.
Yeah.
But basically, let's hope that Ali, or whatever his name is, doesn't have the manners of a typical Facebook person.
Yeah. Okay. Let's assume that.
Yeah, it's like that. Okay, well, if that's the case, and he'll listen to you, and he can deal with reasoned arguments, I would simply ask him this. According to Islam, Jesus was the second greatest of the prophets, and Muhammad was the greatest. But, they teach that Jesus was born of a virgin, which Muhammad was not, and they teach that Jesus' mother was free of original sin, which they do not teach about Muhammad's mother. Now, Jesus having all these supernatural favors and Muhammad not, it seems a little bit weird.
Sorry the tangent, but that's surprising that they believe in the Immaculate Conception.
Yeah.
But that's surprising because I thought the Catholic Church debated this for a long time, and only recently did they pick up the Immaculate Conception.
Let me tell you something.
Only recently did they finalize.
Doubt about the Immaculate Conception was only introduced with Aristotle becoming big. The reason being that Aristotle believed that the soul did not enter the body until the quickening.
The quickening?
Yeah, it's when the baby in the womb starts kicking around.
Oh.
Which, according to him, was, I think, like 4 weeks for men and 6 weeks for women.
That's pretty random. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I know it's random. It's malarkey, but that's beside the point.
Okay.
So St. Thomas picked up on that. And because St. Thomas picked up on it, I mean, mind you, he believed that Our Lady was born without original sin.
Thomas said something similar. He said 40 days was the soul's enshrinement, which was another strange...
It's the word, the quickening. That's the idea.
Oh, okay.
But the thing is, he didn't believe that she was born with original sin. But he didn't believe that she was conceived immaculately because she hadn't been there, basically, at the moment of conception.
Oh.
And that's why today pro-abort Catholics will use St. Thomas to argue for early term abortion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, remember, ladies and gentlemen, there's nothing too awful or stupid that you can't do if you really put your mind to it. So, the thing is that he, what's the word I want? He, St. Thomas was wrong in this area. But he certainly, up until his time, nobody questioned.
Right. Okay. So this was available for taking by the Muslim faith. I mean,
because see, Islam started in the 600s, and if I were not a believing Muslim, and I'm not, what I would say, looking at the thing from the outside, is that he took Christianity and kind of added his own story into it.
Yeah.
And in fact, one of the things that he claims his religion was based on was the Gospel of Jesus. Not one of the 4 Gospels, the Gospel of Jesus.
Okay.
Well, which tells me that he had some sort of version of the gospel story.
Yeah.
Now, they also teach that he was not crucified and didn't die on the cross. There was a sort of a double replaced him, and he just ascended into heaven. And he'll come back one day and tell the Christians they were wrong to worship him. That's the Muslim Jesus. Now, the problem with that, and again, I'm presuming that our Muslim friend is sufficiently non-Facebook and sufficiently traditional Western to be able to look at things. If you look at the Shroud of Turin, if you look at Golgotha, if you look at the various relics of the Passion, there's a lot in the way of evidences of the crucifixion.
Yeah, I was going to say, isn't that a matter of historical record that Jesus of Nazareth was crucified?
It's a matter of historical record, which is why they say he was replaced with some sort of spirit. But, so anyway,
okay.
But to answer the question, I would begin trying to evangelize this gentleman with the Muslim Jesus versus the Christian Jesus.
Yeah.
And which of the two makes more sense?
That sounds like a really good route.
Well, it's the only one I can think of.
That almost that sounds like an easy sell, almost. I mean, how do you contort that in such a strange, perverse fashion?
Well, the human mind, as I just said, you can do anything. It's like using St. Thomas for abortion. Believe me, if you really want to do something, you can. No limit to it.
Okay.
We human beings are masters of self-deception. It's one of the gifts of the fall.
Yeah. Okay, question from Andrew.
Yes?
I have been taking my hunter education course.
Yay!
Early in the course, they explain that wildlife are held in a public trust, unlike in Europe when they belong to the property owner. Could you give an example of other things that we lucky and free Americans hold in public trust that were once properties belonging to individuals?
Well, firstly, there's something here that's kind of interesting to point out. One is that our notion of public trust comes from the king's law, the king's ownership. In Europe, prior to the French Revolution, it was the same. Mm-hmm. The deer and all that were the king's animals, the king's deer. The local landowners got control of them as part of the revolutionary process. Mm. So with them, breaking what we call the public trust was part of liberation. With us, when we got rid of the king, we replaced him with an amorphous thing. The king's deer became the public trust. The crown lands became the public lands. So much of what government does or owns, the king did or owned.
Yeah.
What's it? Oh gosh, my mind's gone. When you see public domain.
Oh, okay.
That comes to us directly from the king. Why? Because the king is the ultimate owner of all the land. Everyone holds their land feudally from the king, which is fine. An Englishman's home is his castle. Unless, for some really outweighing thing, like the king needs a highway, or a fort, or a lighthouse, he has the right to retake...
Oh, eminent domain. You said public domain.
Sorry.
Yeah,
eminent domain.
Yeah.
Eminent domain. That comes to us directly from the monarchy. Mm. And believe me, ain't no government of any kind, no place ever going to give up eminent domain. Ain't happening.
Yeah.
No, sir. Not when they can get your hands. In fact, what's funny with us, eminent domain has gone from that bare bones reading, where for really important things the king could take some of his property back,
yeah,
to, well, any area that's depressed will take over.
Yeah. To,
well, if we could get somebody to pay us a higher tax for your house than you can, we'll take it.
That's unbelievable.
It's from living in an absolute republic instead of an absolute monarchy. Anyway, the point is that there's a lot of this sort of thing. Another one of the, the ultimate question at the end of the day is sovereignty.
Right.
Now, We know that up until 1783, the King of Great Britain was sovereign in the 13 colonies.
Mm-hmm.
King of Spain was sovereign here in California, and so forth. That means everything ultimately devolves upon the king. Okay. And in those places, the chain of title, like this property we're sitting in here, the palatial Tumbler House building, the property it's on may belong to Tumbler House Co. But there's a chain of ownership all the way back to the King of Spain.
Wow.
Now, that's true of every property in a big chunk of the United States. King of Spain, King of France, King of England. All right, well, we have the Revolution. And then, as you know, we have the Articles of Confederation and the Constitution. But then a problem came up in law, which has come up ever since. Who succeeded to the king's sovereignty, the states or the feds? This has never been ruled upon with an overarching decision.
Yeah.
Either they'll look to some other cause, or they'll be very explicit that this only applies to the particular case at hand.
Yeah.
The reason is that if they ever made a definitive judgment that it was either,
yeah,
it would either destroy the federal government or destroy the states.
Yeah.
So they can't do that.
Yeah. It's got to be some strange, weird balance, mixture.
Yeah. And the thing is, you can't question it too closely, because if you do, it doesn't make sense. And then we get all excited and don't know what we're doing. Similarly, in terms of the land ownership, there are two kinds of ways of owning land: feudal and allodial. Allodial means you're the supreme owner of the land. Feudal means you hold it of some allod, that is to say, the king. Now, in this country, it has never been ruled whether we have feudal or allodial ownership. And it's the same thing. There's a real important reason why they can't do that.
Yeah.
Because if they say, oh, we have feudal ownership, that's nice. Who?
Yeah.
It can't be the federal government, because constitutionally it's not equipped for that.
Yeah.
It can't be the states for the same reason. Contrariwise, if we rule that we have allodial ownership, guess what? No more eminent domain. So we'll never touch that.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, there's a lot of stuff like that. Another example is the right of a higher court to intervene in the affairs of a lower court. That's called King's Bench jurisdiction.
Yeah.
In American law.
Yeah, King's Bench. Well, yeah, we got it from them.
We got it from them.
Yeah.
But we still call it King's Bench jurisdiction.
Yeah.
And similarly, when you talk about breaking the peace, keeping the peace, justice of the peace, what does that mean? Well, again, it's the king's peace.
Yeah.
But which king? Well, we can't say. We can't. So to answer your question, there's an awful lot of stuff like that floating around in our setup. What has never existed is libertarian paradise. Absolute individual ownership. Never happened anywhere. It's just that in a monarchy you can justify it in a way that you can't in a republic. Because the theory behind the republic is that the totality of the people are sovereign. But aren't I one of the people? And if I are one of the people, then why can't I have absolute allodial ownership of my home? Well, there are a lot of reasons why that is, but they can't really make sense logically. Just utilitarian only, if that's the word. So there it is. Hope that helps.
Yep. That was one of my favorite parts of Star Spangled Crown, Charles's book, available at tumblerhouse.com.
Was that a plug?
That was a plug, in fact.
Wow.
Go buy it now.
Okay, great.
Okay, our last question for today is from Justin.
Okay, Justin.
How has communism evolved in the 21st century? How should we label it? What are its ideologies and goals? And is it still infiltrated in the church? Wow. We could spend an hour on that one.
Yeah, I could. Well, the short version is, if I were to label communism as it is today, I'd say us.
How dare you?
Arise, ye morons of the world, shake off your brains, and anyway. Obviously, my version of the Internationale is not getting very far. No, I mean to say that the short version, I could go on and on and on about this. The short version is that if you were a person old enough to remember, say, 1954 or even 1964, and you could get yourself into the mindset of who you were then, and look around you, you would think the communists won the Cold War. It's that simple. I mean, obviously I'm painting with a very broad brush.
You've said this in previous episodes. I remember the specific line you said. You said, we have become what we have feared.
Yeah, we have. We have. We have become cold and soulless and dead and stupid. We have become godless communism. How has it infiltrated the church? Church leadership that doesn't have a problem with society being like this. You know, they don't mind either. No one minds. It's all okay. No, it's not okay. It's garbage. And our ancestors would be whirling in their graves if they could see not only the situation as it is, but our pusillanimity in response to it. You know, you could go on and on as to the how and the why it happened, but happen it did. So, you know, if you want to know where the communists are, in the immortal words, to paraphrase, no, actually direct quote, of that wonderful Stephen Sondheim song, Send in the Clowns, don't bother, they're here.
One of the things I remember, I was watching we talked on this before, the documentary on EWTN on Saul Alinsky, A Wolf in Sheep's Clothing,
sure.
That very much covered the communist infiltration in the church and social programs and all that. And I remember they quoted, I think the communist leader in America, or whoever this guy is, and he said one of the important things was to change the names.
Well.
The word communism doesn't work, so we have to change the names, and the names are liberalism and progressivism.
Yeah, and progressivism, you know, part of the thing too you got to bear in mind, ladies and gentlemen, is that communism did not develop in a vacuum. It did arise in response to certain real evils. The problem was that their recipes for these evils were worse than the things themselves. You know, you're suffering from a stomach ache, the strychnine will cure you. That'll cure you all right.
Yeah, it'll cure me all right.
You won't have to worry anymore. So, but to answer your question, we have become everything we feared. Just looking, I mean, my God, looking at everything. The scouts, the military, the church, the state, the tearing down of statues, in the name of some vague ideology. It's all communism. But that's a word that doesn't mean anything to anyone today. In fact, you'll see people running around with Che Guevara t-shirts and all that. I mean, you have any idea who this was? No, but my friends say he's cool. Yeah, well, you know what? Your friends are as stupid as you are. How about that? Tell you what, get rid of your Che t-shirt, wear a Hitler t-shirt and see what you get. Idiots. I mean, look, the Reds had a much higher body count than the Nazis, okay? So the Nazis were bad, the Reds were worse. I don't see why this is hard to understand. I mean, if body count is all we're talking about. Oh, that was different. How was it different? Well, we were allied to the communists. Yeah. Oh, you've got me there. We were allied to them. You bet. And we continue to make money and to have money made out of us by the communists in China. So they can't be all bad, can they?
Well, I can't mention it. But the latest thing with the church and China, I don't know what to say about that.
Well, I'll put it this way. Do you ever feel embarrassed for someone? You know, somebody gets up on stage and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to sing a song that I made famous 50 years ago." But the song is all about being young and new and pretty and all that. And the person singing it is old and just... And their voice is cracked.
Yeah.
And, you know, they would have done their entire legacy a great favor by retiring.
Mm.
You know? Instead they get up there, "I'm so young and beautiful." You're embarrassed for that person.
Yeah.
You know, you don't hate their guts. You just, please, just sit down.
Yeah.
You know, it's okay. You don't have to prove anything to anybody anymore. Well, I feel very much that way about the author of the new China policy. I'm embarrassed for him. I'm embarrassed for the schism it will cause, because this is a parallel, ladies and gentlemen, in papal history. Many's the time the Holy See cuts a deal with oppressors of the church in hopes of restoring normal sacramental life to that area of the church. Well, what usually happens is that the people they make the deal with smash the biggest offenders of the church. They may or may not keep part of the deal in terms of people being able to get to the sacraments, but it's never pretty. And inevitably, a group of the Catholics who have spent so much time resisting, and whose very resistance got the church anything,
Yeah.
They won't have it.
Yeah.
You know, we shed our blood so that some old moron in Rome could just sign away everything we've suffered for. Now, mind you, I don't think he's an old moron in Rome. Not Francis, not Pius XI and the Cristeros, not Pius VII and the Pius IX and the Cristeros, Pius VII and the Petit Église in France, and on and on and on and on and on. I don't think they were old morons. What I'm saying is, if you were in the position of having had your families suffer, lose members, been murdered, whatever, over decades, and along comes some fellow miles away out of the deal who by sudden fiat basically says to you anyway, even if it's not objectively true, this sacrifice was worthless. Everything you've gone through, you should have stuck with the regime from the beginning. Then you'd have been smarter. So I will just say that I am extremely embarrassed for the author of this thing, whoever he may be, and whatever his rank, be he the Secretary of State or anything else. He probably would do us all a favor at this stage by just shutting up.
Yeah.
There will be a schism in China, ladies and gentlemen, and it will be the most faithful, devout members of the church, some of them, who will be part of it. And the responsibility will belong solely to the church's leadership.
We can't end the show on that, on schism.
No, we can't. So...
we want happy fun
Happy
thoughts.
fun. All right. Happy fun thoughts. Well, this isn't going to do you guys living 3 days in the future any good. But tomorrow is the Feast of St. Blaise.
Oh, the throats. Getting the throats blessed.
Get the throats blessed. So that's one thing I hope you thought about. If you didn't, well, tough. I don't know what to say. You'll be glad to know, though, that Mardi Gras is coming up.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I think, gosh, is Ash Wednesday? No,
Ash Wednesday is Valentine's Day, which is weird. Which is weird.
Not necessarily, when you consider how many times relationships turn out so to begin.
As a bachelor, you would act this way.
No, I'm just saying. I can understand. It makes perfect sense to me.
I don't like that.
Hearts and ashes. Won't you be my Valentine? See the Valentine with the...
You're sadistic.
No, I'm just... That's better than schism.
Well, that's true.
That got you there, Mikey. No, I heavens to Betsy. Yeah, that's Valentine's Day. Oh, God.
All right.
Well,
kill yourself.
So, ladies and gentlemen, this Valentine's Day, take your sweetheart out for a romantic fish and chips.
You're terrible.
No, I think it's wonderful. Festive bread and water. Whee! Nothing says romance quite like ashes on the forehead. Oh, golly. Well, if I were you, ladies and gentlemen, and I wanted to show my inamorata or inamorato, I guess, a good time, do something for Mardi Gras this year. Because Valentine's Day is going to be kind of a wash. So, forget the hearts and flowers, stick with the gumbo and masks.
Okay, we'll see you next time, everyone.
God bless you all. Take care.